Have you ever wondered what it feels like to stare death in the face and somehow make it out alive? Imagine being trapped, no way out, no hope, and then, against all odds, you escape. Some kidnappings are so terrifying, so beyond belief, that the way the victims manage to free themselves seems almost like a miracle. These are not just survival stories. They are battles against pure evil, where every second counted. And trust me, once you start this list, you won't be able to look away, because number 1 will leave you speechless. Let's start with number 10. But be warned, as we go down this list, things only get darker, more terrifying, and absolutely shocking. Number 10. The girl who outsmarted a monster. A young girl, barely in her teens, walking home from school on a quiet suburban street. She had walked this path 100 times before, but this time, something felt different. A slow-moving car crept behind her. She glanced back, just a normal-looking man in the driver's seat. Nothing alarming, until he pulled over. In an instant, she was grabbed. A hand over her mouth. Darkness. Silence. The sound of a car speeding away. She had vanished. For days, she was locked in a tiny room. No windows, no escape. The man would come in watching her, making sure she had no way to run. He thought she was weak, helpless. But what he didn't know was that she had been paying attention. One night, as he entered with food, she made her move. She had loosened the ropes around her wrists just enough. The moment he turned his back, she lunged, biting, scratching, fighting with everything she had. The man, shocked by her strength, stumbled back. That was her moment. She sprinted out of the door, down the hall, into the night. Barefoot, bleeding, running as fast as she could until she reached a road, where a passing driver stopped in shock. The police arrived minutes later, but when they stormed the house, they found something chilling. She wasn't the first girl he had taken, she was just the first to escape. Number 9. Buried alive. The unbelievable escape. A woman in her late 20s living an ordinary life never thought she'd become the target of a nightmare. She had just finished shopping when 2 masked figures grabbed her, forcing her into a van. The world went black. When she woke up, she felt dirt against her skin. Darkness. Suffocating. She wasn't just trapped. She was underground. Buried alive. She screamed, but the earth swallowed her voice. She pushed against the wooden box she was trapped in, her fingers scraping at the surface. No one could hear her. No one even knew she was missing yet. But she refused to die. She slowed her breathing, thinking. And then she felt something. Her engagement ring. A sharp diamond. With shaking hands, she used it to dig, carving away at the fragile wood above her. Minutes passed. Then hours. Her fingers bled, but she kept going. Until finally, she felt the weight above her shift. The soil above cracked open, and with one final push, she clawed her way out, gasping for air beneath the night sky. She stumbled to a road where she collapsed. When she woke up, she was in a hospital. The police found the site where she had been buried, but the kidnappers? They were never found. Number 8. The boy who escaped the unescapable. A 12-year-old boy, home alone. A knock on the door. He wasn't supposed to open it, but curiosity got the best of him. The second he unlocked the door, a shadow pushed inside. The boy was taken, driven to a remote house in the middle of nowhere. His captor was no amateur. The doors were sealed. The windows were covered. The man left nothing to chance. But he underestimated one thing, the boy's mind. Instead of panicking, the boy observed. He noticed the lock pattern on the front door, the way the man opened and closed it, the sound it made. He waited. And on the third night, when the man finally fell asleep, he made his move. He recreated the exact sequence of movements he had seen. One wrong move, and he would be caught. Click. The door opened. He ran, as fast as his legs could carry him, through the woods, through the dark. His heart pounded as he saw a light ahead, a gas station. He burst in, breathless, yelling for help. The police arrived in minutes. The man who took him? A wanted criminal with a history of missing children. If the boy had waited even one more night, he might never have made it out. Number 6. The man who fought back in the dark. It was past midnight when a man walking home was suddenly pulled into a van. A cloth over his face. The smell of chemicals. Blackness. When he woke up, he was tied to a chair in an unfamiliar room. His captors weren't amateurs. They had no plans to let him go, but they made one mistake. They left him alone for just a few minutes, and that was all he needed. Using sheer force, he broke one of the wooden legs of the chair. The impact sliced the ropes around his wrists. With no time to think, he attacked, fighting his way through the dark house. He found an open window. He jumped. Bruised, bleeding, but alive, he ran for his life. When he reached a police station, the officers were shocked. They had been searching for him for days, and when they raided the house he escaped from, they discovered something chilling. His captors had been doing this for years, and no one had ever gotten away. Until now. Number 5. The child who outsmarted his captors. A 6-year-old boy was playing in his front yard, his mother watching from the porch. It was an ordinary day, until a van pulled up. In a split second, a man jumped out, grabbed the child, and sped away. His mother ran, screaming, but the vehicle disappeared into the distance. The boy was too young to understand what was happening, but he knew one thing: he had to get back to his family. His captors took him to an isolated house where they planned to keep him until a ransom was paid. But they underestimated the mind of a 6-year-old. He watched, he listened, and he waited. One night, when his captors left the room, he noticed something. The lock on the window wasn't fully closed. He climbed up, small enough to slip through the narrow gap, and dropped to the ground. The house was surrounded by a dense forest, but he didn't stop running. For hours, he wandered in the dark until he saw something, a flickering light, a gas station. He ran inside, tears streaming down his face, and managed to say just one thing: "Help me." The gas station clerk called the police immediately. Within an hour, his parents arrived, breaking down in tears. And the captors? They were caught that same night, still searching for the boy who had outsmarted them all. Number 4. The woman who jumped from a moving car. It was supposed to be just another taxi ride home. A young woman hailed a cab after a late shift at work, exhausted but relieved to be on her way back. But something felt off. The driver wasn't following the usual route. Her heart pounded as she saw unfamiliar streets. Then, without warning, the doors locked with a mechanical click. She tried to stay calm. "You're going the wrong way," she said. The driver didn't respond. Instead, he sped up. That's when she knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was a trap. Thinking fast, she reached into her purse, gripping a pen, her only weapon. She struck, jamming it into the driver's neck. He howled in pain, momentarily losing control of the wheel. That was her chance. The car was still moving, but she didn't care. She threw herself against the door, breaking the glass, and leaped out. The asphalt tore at her skin, but she forced herself up and ran. Behind her, the car screeched to a halt. The driver tried to come after her, but headlights appeared in the distance. Another car. A witness. She collapsed in the middle of the road as the other driver stopped. Police arrived minutes later. The taxi driver? He wasn't a taxi driver at all. He was a serial predator who had been hunting women for years. She was the only one who had fought back and lived. Number 3. The underground prison escape. A man in his mid-30s vanished without a trace after leaving his office late at night. Days passed, then weeks. His family feared the worst. But he was alive. Deep underground, in a soundproof bunker built by his captors. They had taken everything from him: his freedom, his identity, even the concept of time. But they didn't take away his mind. For months, he studied every detail of his prison. He memorized his captors' routines. He noticed patterns. And then one day he found his chance. The lock on his chains had rusted slightly. Using a tiny piece of metal he had pried from the wall, he worked at the lock, slowly, patiently. Night after night he chipped away. And then, click. His hands were free. His feet were free. But the door was still locked. He waited, heart pounding, until the moment came. One of his captors entered, food in hand. The second the door opened, he attacked with everything he had. A struggle, a crash. Then silence. He grabbed the keys, unlocked the outer door, and ran. up flights of stairs through corridors until he burst into the open air. He had been underground for almost a year, and yet, the moment he saw the stars above him, he knew he was finally free. His captors? Arrested. And their underground prison? Destroyed. Number 2. The woman who escaped by leaving clues. She had been missing for months. Everyone thought she was gone forever, but she was alive, trapped in a remote cabin in the mountains. Her captor was careful. He never let her near phones, never let her outside alone. But he made one mistake. He let her write letters. He forced her to send fake messages to her family, pretending everything was fine. But she was smarter than he realized. In every letter, she embedded tiny clues, codes in her handwriting, symbols in the margins, a desperate cry for help hidden in plain sight. Her family noticed. They brought the letters to the police, who analyzed them closely. Then they saw it. Coordinates, written in a barely noticeable pattern. A team was sent immediately. They reached the cabin just as the captor was preparing to move her somewhere else. The rescue was swift. The moment the police burst in, she collapsed in relief. The world thought she had disappeared, but she had outwitted the man who tried to erase her. And now, we come to number 1. The most terrifying, the most shocking, and the most miraculous escape of them all. Number 1. The man who escaped an entire cartel. He was a journalist investigating something he was never supposed to see. A powerful group had warned him to stop digging. He didn't listen. And then, he disappeared. Kidnapped in broad daylight, he was thrown into a vehicle and driven to a location so secretive that even his captors wore masks to hide it from him. They had one goal, to silence him forever. But they underestimated him. He knew he had no weapons, no way to overpower them. But he had one thing, his words. He spoke. He told them he wasn't alone, that people knew where he was, that even if they killed him, others would come looking. He made them doubt their plan. For hours he talked, buying himself time, until finally a chance appeared, a moment of hesitation. He saw the door slightly ajar. In a split second he lunged, using all his strength to fight past the guard. He ran through the compound, bullets whizzing past him. He didn't stop. He crashed through a fence, tumbling onto a road, where headlights appeared. A car. Salvation. He waved desperately, and the driver stopped, pulling him in. They sped away just as his captors arrived, too late to take him back. He made it out alive. But even to this day, no one knows exactly where he was held. The place vanished without a trace. And just like that, he became the man who escaped the unescapable. These were 10 of the most dangerous kidnappings where victims miraculously escaped. Their stories prove one thing: when faced with the worst, the human will to survive is unstoppable. Which one of these stories shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more unbelievable stories like these, make sure to subscribe. Because hitting your subscribe button can give me new motivation to work harder and succeed. And remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't just stories, they're real.